welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And this evening I am delighted to be joined by Alex Chaudhari, or A A Chaudhari, as her books will say. Alex is here. She has written 3 books. She's Mine, The Loyal Friend, and her most recent book, which we're going to talk about this evening, is The Final Party. Actually, I'm that way. Trying to get it in the camera. So Alex is a former city lawyer who left law to become a writer, and she lives in Surrey with her family. It's absolutely great to talk to you this evening,
Lovely
Alex.
to be here. Thank you for having me.
And you're going to chat to us about the book. And what was the, do you want to tell everybody about the sort of premise of the book if people haven't read it?
Yeah, definitely. So the overall premise is 3 couples, they gather together in this luxury villa high in the hills above the glamorous town of Sorrento in southern Italy. And obviously they think they're going there for the perfect 40th birthday celebration. But at the beginning of the week, one of the groups starts to receive anonymous text messages threatening to reveal a dark secret from their university days. 4 of them were at Oxford University around sort of 20 years before. And before the week is out, as a result of these messages and what happens, one of them is dead. So that's the overall premise. And sort of the action flips between the holiday in Italy, and we also have quite a few flashbacks to their time in Oxford to see what happened. And gradually the pieces of the puzzle come together at the end with a lot of twists in between.
There is a lot of twists in between. And Alex is actually going to read from the book, just the prologue,
Yeah,
just whet your appetite.
I read the prologue just to give you a bit of an idea, because the rest of the book has too many spoilers, I think. So
it is quite a difficult book to discuss, as we'll find out, but we're not giving any spoilers tonight, because if you haven't read it, you need to read it. So
okay. Prologue. Sorrento, Italy, Thursday, 8th of August 2019. The storm has finally abated, the trees no longer being punched from every angle, the rain less fierce. More of a sedate spitting than a persistent pinballing of hailstones. The wind has died down too. For much of the night, until around 3 a.m, it had howled like an animal in pain. Now there is more of a soft whisper travelling through the air, causing a faint rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds and tittering of insects just about audible, having previously been drowned out by the thunderous elements. But the sky remains a grim fossil grey, a hue that sits ill with the usually heavenly scenery. Bleak and ominous, but scarily fitting for what awaits them. The poolside area is soaked. Mammoth-sized puddles of water have gathered in certain patches, causing the officers recently called to the scene to tread cautiously for fear of slipping underfoot, while a carpet of sodden leaves and stray twigs has layered the normally spotless swimming pool. But there's something else in the water, something that catches their attention as they venture further. A body, floating face down, swimming in its own blood. They eye the rest of the villa's inhabitants suspiciously. 6 friends had started the week on seemingly good terms, here for a rest and the perfect birthday celebration. But the perfect week in paradise has turned into the holiday from hell, because one of them is dead. One of them is a killer. But which of them here is guilty? Ta-da!
such a good prologue. It's one of those when you read it, you go, I know, I've got to go on. I've got to carry on.
Yeah, that's the intention.
Yeah. So we start off with, so we've got 3 couples. We've got Lana and Johnny. We've got Marcus and Vanessa, and we've got Nick and Padma. And we find out quite early on in the book, I don't think it's a massive spoiler to say something happens to Padma to her in a previous life, doesn't it? We don't know. We won't go into too much details, but
back at Oxford, quite a traumatic event happened to her. Yeah,
when she's at university. So the 6 of them go off to celebrate Vanessa's 40th birthday. And as you say, something happens. They get the text start to go in. There's quite a lot of history, isn't there, between the couples, although that sort of develops as you go along. But what gave you the inspiration to write the story, well, write both of the stories? Because actually it is one narrative in the present day, but actually it does flash back, doesn't it, is it 2001, I think?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. It does flash back to that.
Well, I suppose I mean, I centered on friendships for a start, because I think friendships are such a compelling thing to talk about. We all have friends. We all have, we've all felt betrayed by friends. We've all invested our deepest, darkest secrets in our friends. So I think that's a very compelling topic for readers, so they enjoy that side of things. And I think also I wanted to see how a mistake when you're younger can carry on and have a domino effect in later life, and how it can fester in you, and it can actually eat you up as time goes on, and it can actually cause you to distance yourselves from the friends that you were so, I mean, obviously people like Johnny and Padma, they used to go out, they were so close, but now they barely talk because something happened at university that's caused them to drift apart, and they're both quite suspicious of each other. And also, I think over time, people's voices change, because you do change as a person over the course of 20 years.
Absolutely.
The person you are at 40 is, I mean, I'm certainly not myself. The person I am now, when I was in my 20s, is very different. I was very naive in many ways. So I like doing that dual timeline, because I think not only does it show why something happened and give context to it, it also shows how people can change and how it can affect the relationships in different ways.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of authors do sort of have sort of flashbacks but I think with this book it was so central, wasn't it, to the plot?
But for Padma, someone like Padma, because she was such a confident person when she started at Oxford. She was, she wanted to be a high-flying magazine editor. She was going out with the best-looking guy in Oxford. The world was her oyster, even though she came from quite a humble background, and she's half Indian. She's suffered racism growing up. Her parents weren't particularly rich, but then she's thrown into this elite society, and the world's her oyster. And then this terrible thing happens to her. And 20 years later, she's like a different person. She flinches at every noise. She's worried about, being attacked. She's just so different to how she was. And it just shows how an event can change a person.
Definitely. And I think it's an interesting dynamic, because Johnny and Vanessa have obviously got history as well, which goes back many, many years.
Yes.
Because they sort of grew up together. They both come from very affluent families, and their sort of parents weren't around that much for them. So they've got a bond, haven't they?
They have, because they're both only children, and they were both sort of brought up in a sort of public school environment, Tory fathers, very much, palmed off to the childminder, but they were each other's, like brother and sister almost.
Definitely.
Sort of solace in each other.
So when we started talking just off camera, we were saying about one of your other books has 9 characters in. So this one has 6 main characters, which I imagine 9 is a huge, enormous feat. 6 is actually quite a feat. How did you keep a track of them as you were going through? Because they all have their own perspectives in the book, don't you? That you have snippets of each of them. There's chapters for each of them. And did they develop as you wrote them, or did you always have an idea of what Johnny was going to be like, or what Marcus was going to be like? Or
I do spend a lot of time on characterization, because I think in a psychological thriller it's very much character driven. Obviously the plot is important, but the characters are driving the plot forward. So I do although I'm not a great plotter in terms of the overall plot, I will spend a lot of time on each character. I'll think about the character, and I will do a sort of a page on each character and think about, their background, their childhood, the way they look, the way they appear to others, how they speak, just so each voice can come out. And then I think about how they could be related to each other and have an overall purpose in the plot going forward. Because there's no point having millions of characters if they don't have a real purpose in the story. They've got to fit into the central plot. So I always bear that in mind before I start. But I like the idea of each character having a say, because they are three couples, and I wanted to see things from all of their perspectives, because I think, that, and having different characters sort of ramps up the intrigue, I think, because the reader's being told one thing by one character, and then they go to the next character and they're told something else, and they're, oh, so he said that. So that keeps them guessing, so they never really know who's the one telling the truth, or maybe they're all lying, but you don't actually know who the ultimate culprit is, because they've all got these secrets. And
well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, that was definitely the case. As you went through, it was definitely not one of those books where you clock it in the first sort of, you think, oh, I know who did it. I was even even I'm not going to give any spoilers, but even when I did know, there's still surprises.
Right,
I think,
hopefully.
yeah, right up until the end. I was sat at work reading it outside, and somebody came over to me and said, "What are you reading?" And I was like, they were like, what? And I was like, "Why?" And they were like, "Oh, you're really like, you can just see you're like completely
really?
engrossed."
That's really good to hear.
I'm in a really good bit, and I've got to try and finish it in like 5 minutes before I go back to work.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was great. So did you always start off? Did you know that you were going to have you knew you were going to have your three couples? Did that sort of come quite quickly, or did it take a while for you to sort of get their voices and their sort of?
It took a while to get their voices. Yeah, I did work on
Yeah.
those, because I introduce each character to begin with, to try and set it up and set up each character for the reader before I launch into the main story bit. So I did spend quite a bit of time on those, honing those characters, making sure their voices come out, and also sort of their backgrounds as well, so that we know that they're not all the same. For example, Nick is from a really humble background, and he's had to strive to get to where he is in university. And although he's best friends with Johnny, there's that sort of underlying resentment that Johnny's always had it all. Johnny gets the girls, and so that type of thing came on as I went over it and edited it. I sort of brought those things out a bit more.
And sort of that darkness as well, because it does get quite dark, doesn't it? There's several bits, but I think for me, some of the darkness surprised me, because which again is really difficult to talk about, and if you read the book, you'll understand why. But as particularly with characters, is you never really know them, do you? You never really know how they're going to be. But I think in the beginning, certain people you think are not going to be as they appeared to be, and then that was I thought that was really clever.
Well, that's the intention, because I want to lull the reader into a certain direction, and so that they're surprised at the end. And I think it's sort of that art of misdirection, sort of dropping in little subtle hints, but not too obvious, so that they're not going to clock straight away.
No, it was excellent. I really enjoyed it, and there was lots of drama. So as the book goes along, we sort of learn more about the past, but we also learn a lot about the present as well, because there's quite a lot going on in each of their lives, isn't there? And big things that are kept from. I think I can say that massive things that are kept from each other's other halves. Which
you're thinking of Padma and Nick, I think, one of the things.
But also Marcus and Nessa, because
yes, of course, that's a pretty big thing.
There's a couple of big things in there. So was that quite interesting to write?
It is, because you've got to be careful, because obviously writing in the first person, you're so into the character's head, you're that close, so it would feel very unnatural not to give some clue or hint that they're hiding something, that they've got this secret that they wish they could tell their other halves but can't, because obviously as human beings we would naturally think about that. So but the clue is to make it as subtle as possible, so that it's gradually drip feeded in until the shock element. But it is quite tricky when you're writing in the first person, because you are in their heads, so you have to be quite.
I hadn't thought of that, because I guess it's very different to when you read it you're reading it, looking in on the person, aren't you? Rather than when you're writing it as coming out, sort of thing. So
exactly.
And I think so the characters they're really well developed, but they're also they're all flawed, aren't they? There's flaws. I
Yeah,
mean, everybody has flaws, but
yeah,
I think that is really good for, that sort of amateur detective that we all like to be when you're reading a book.
yeah,
You want to try and suss the character out, and particularly when you're having it from the first person perspective, you think, oh yeah, well, I
yeah.
know who they are, I know what they're like. So
Yeah.
actually that's, really.
Definitely. I think the flawed narrator is obviously a key element of the psychological thriller. There's always
Yeah,
something, a dark secret or an
yeah.
addiction, something that makes you doubt whether what they're saying is true. And then when you have six of them at the same time doing that, it's making you change your mind all the time. And that's why I really enjoyed doing that. But I really enjoy getting into different characters' skins. It's fun to become a different person, and just
Yeah.
to be a bit bad as well. I mean, it was, I'm like so not like most of my characters, but it's a joy. That's the freedom of being a writer, to be able to go in there and be that person and say those things and act in that way. That's the joy of writing. That's why I love it so much.
I think that's like the joy of being a reader, and I think that's why crime and psychological crime is so popular, because it
Yeah,
does take you to another world that you'd never, unless you were
exactly.
working for the police, or as a psychologist or something like that, you're
Yeah.
never going to experience
No.
that. Well, hopefully you're not going to experience that type of. So I think that's for us, for the reader as well, is it's the more you can get into those
Mm.
characters and
And I
get to
think
know them.
when it's something relatable, like on a holiday or like with friends, because we've all got the ability to go down a dark path. We're all fallible human beings, and you know
Yeah.
most of us hopefully don't choose to do that. So, but it forces us to sort of examine the darkness in ourselves and think, oh, if I was in that situation, what would I do? And it's such a close to the bone feeling, and I think that's what makes the psychological thriller so spine chilling sometimes, because it's all about real human emotions that we could all fall foul of, the darker side of human nature.
Yeah, because was there any point where they become unruly for you, sort of, that you think where they're going, you think what direction you're taking them in, and then something happens and you think, well, I can't do that, or I think they should do this instead? Is that something that comes with the editing, or?
Yeah, I mean, editing, I'm a huge editor. I don't know if it's the lawyer inside me, but I'm absolutely anal about editing. I edit, 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 edit. And I do pick up on things, even on the 20th read through, I'll pick up on things. I'm like,
Really? Whoa.
how did I miss that? God, I really, readers are clever. They're going to pick that. They'll pick up on that. What were you thinking? So I will. There will always be things that you spot, particularly as my plots are quite complicated. So
Yeah.
it's inevitable that something will come up. But not in terms of characters, I don't think. I'm normally quite sure about where my characters are going. Although sometimes the loyal friend, the ending wasn't how I thought it would be at the beginning. I changed the ending.
Oh, really?
So
That's interesting.
that sort of came to me quite late on in the process, and I changed that. So I
Is
do.
that quite difficult when you have that, when you sort of think that you're going in one way, or did it feel natural to
It
do it?
feels right. It feels exciting,
Yeah.
actually. I love it when I get that feeling, because it's a bit, because I'm not a plotter, and sometimes it's like, oh no, what if it could all go horribly wrong, and I've written 50,000 words and I'll have to scrap it. But on the other hand, if you start writing and then all these great twists and red herrings things come to you, that's quite exciting part of the process as well. So I quite enjoy that feeling when you think, yes, that's going to sort of throw
Yeah.
a curveball in. So yeah, that's the joy of crime writing, I think, because it's such a
Yeah.
challenge. It's such a challenge. It's a challenge for me as a writer, and it's a challenge for the reader to try and solve it before you get to the end, even though you kind of don't want to solve it, because that's what's making you turn the pages. So
Yeah, I always think a good book is when I don't solve it.
yeah,
I think, like you said, I think the reader wants to be surprised, and I think if you're surprised as a writer, then that definitely comes over very much in the writing.
yes,
And I think but I think it must be difficult to just, because it's, people say, that you have to give the reader a chance to guess, and is that difficult to sort of put enough in but not too much?
yeah,
So
it is quite, because they always say Agatha Christie was a master of this, don't they? They always say, she'd throw in a clue and she'd throw in a red herring, but the emphasis would be more on the red herring than the clue. But there would be that, and then you'd go back and think, I saw
Yeah.
that. So that's the type of thing I always try and aim for, which is enough of a subtle hint with something else to throw someone on a different tangent. But it is tricky to do that. It takes quite a lot of thought, because you don't want to lead the reader too much, just enough to make them a bit suspicious, but also not quite sure if what they're thinking is right.
Because we said about, you said you're not really a
Detailed.
planner.
I'm not a detailed plotter, no.
Are you more of a pantser then? Are you sort of
yeah, I think so. I'll have a general idea, particularly with my psychological thrillers. I mean, I did write a couple of legal thrillers with Loom Books that were published back in 2019, and they were police procedurals. So
okay.
I was more of a plotter with those because I needed to get the procedure right and things like that. But with psychological thrillers, I tend to just start with an idea and I just start writing. The characters propel the plot for me, as it were. So yeah,
it is quite a feat. I mean, and when people, I think lots of writers who are watching and listening will say that having that many characters to have a sort of significant role is quite a thing to do. But obviously it works for you because you said, and I guess that's your sort of unique selling point really, is that you do manage to keep these characters in check and do what you want with them, and but also it flows along nicely, so you're getting those different perspectives coming into the story, which definitely keeps you you want more, you want to know more about, and then the chapter changes and it's somebody else and you're like, yes, but I want to know more about Johnny.
When I end the chapter, I do kind of try and make it natural that the next chapter should be the next person. There's normally something that the previous person has said that makes it a natural flow onto the next one, something they've hinted at with that person, so that it all connects together. I think there's one chapter when Johnny thinks about when he met Lana, or how she, well, I don't want to say, but how they ended up being together, and then it kind of flows into that, so you see things from her perspective. So I always try and join them up in a logical way. Otherwise, it will get confusing for the reader, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is this, if you are having, several characters, that it has to be, because I think there's some where there's sort of like a message, isn't there? And then it goes into the sort of the person who, there's a message that pops up, but then the next person will come along and that sort of picks up from there, and you're like, oh, okay, that's where that's going. So but I mean, how do you sort of keep track of that when you're writing? Because obviously, did you write it as two separate stories? Did you write it as the...
this was the first book when I actually did separate riders for some things, because normally I'm quite a linear writer. I would just write the whole book, but I actually did do some of the Oxford chapters separately. I'd make a new Word document and I'd write them, and then I fitted them in afterwards.
Interesting,
to see whether and I did shift things around a little bit as well, just to make sure they flowed in the right place. Because I knew the scenes that I wanted in Oxford, but I had to make sure that they fitted with the Italy scenes as well, that they weren't just sort of chucked in anywhere,
so it sort of flowed, and because I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's why I was asking, because it did really flow. So you would have you'd have your your sort of Sorrento, and then you would go back to, but there was normally something that had happened, whether it was a character thinking about something that had happened, or that took us back to that time. So that was but I did wonder how you did that, because obviously, like you say, you don't want it just to be like, it wasn't like just dropped in, it sort of seamlessly flowed into. But it was but I did wonder if you had to write it as a...
That's the first time I've done that, actually. It was normally... It's funny, isn't it? It shows how you always think you write the same way, but no, it's the same. So that was a different experience for me.
So when you write, so how long does it take you to write a book?
So I started that book in April of last year, and I finished it by August.
Wow. So I
wrote that one quite fast. Sometimes books will take 6 months, but the last two books have taken about 4 months, because I've a contract now, so I'm on a sort of deadline to the pressure's on a bit to get it done. And obviously, at the same time, we're trying to promote the one that, you know, the Loyal Friend was about to come out when I started writing this one.
Yeah.
But it was a real pleasure to write this one, I think, because I don't know if you know, but I know Sorrento very well. That's why
I was going to ask you about that. So
that's why I chose, because I always wanted to write a thriller abroad, because most of my thrillers have been in the London area, because I know London so well, and authors tend to write about places they know because it comes across authentically. So I thought, oh, you know, I want to write a thriller abroad. So Sorrento was just the obvious choice, because we first went when I was 9 years old. I'm an only child. We went with my parents, and they fell in love with the area. I'm not kidding. We went back about 30 times, and my husband and I got married there.
Oh goodness!
So,
my son's there on holiday at the moment.
Oh, lovely! Oh, I'm really jealous.
Yeah. Oh, so am I.
Yeah, I bet. But yeah, the people, just the culture, and I know it so well. I mean, I can picture every nook and cranny, street, restaurant, the smells. So it was really nice to be able to transport myself back there as well as readers.
Yeah.
And it was a really easy piece of research, because I didn't really have to do anything.
No, I think that definitely comes through, that it's somewhere that you know, and as much as it's not, they're not having the best holiday, are they? But you know, they go on the boat, and you know,
it goes on cruise to Capri, and then they just wander through the town, the Piazza Tasso, go down to the fishing village and have dinner there, and you can, you know, I tried to feed in. I mean, you don't want it to sound like a travel guide, but you want to feed in enough of the atmosphere, and
definitely.
And you know, because I think if you're going to set a thriller abroad, you might as well have it in London if you're not going to get in some of the scenery and the feel of the place. And I think there's a great, there's an irony in that, isn't it? Because you're in this beautiful, idyllic place.
Yeah.
You know, you think you're there for this wonderful, peaceful, relaxing vacation, when there's this darkness lurking, and any minute now it's all going to, come to the boil. So it's that juxtaposition between beautiful surroundings and something very sinister about to happen. And of course, they're trapped somewhere that they're not familiar with either. So that almost ramps up the suspense as well, because you as a reader know that they're not at home. There's no easy means to sort of escape. They're all trapped together in this villa.
And I think we all like to go, it's nice, you know, as well as the escapism of the sort of the genre, the escapism of going on holiday, and, you know, and hopefully we're not going on holiday where something like that's going to happen. But actually just being able to go, I think the whole thing of reading, isn't it, is being able to be transported to
a nice setting. Yeah, particularly in the winter, you know, it's nice to pick up a summer thriller in the winter, just so you can lose yourself in an exotic location or something. It's nice.
And I think also I could definitely see it as being a book that's going to be read by the pool sort of thing, you know, that sort of, you know,
I hope so.
I always love that. I love that on holiday, going around. Not so much, you don't get it so much now, because a lot of people read Kindles, but I always love walking around the pool and seeing what people are
well, Hira did such a brilliant job with the cover. I mean, it's
great.
It's a brilliant cover. I mean, when I first saw it, I mean, it's just, they got it spot on. I mean, I can't thank them enough for that. So yeah, it's very, very attractive cover.
Was it your title? Did you choose the title, or was that part of the publishers that chose the title?
The publishers that chose the title.
Because that fits very well.
Something boring like The Reunion or something. I just because I knew I was going to write about a reunion. No, it wasn't actually. No, that was the first one, and then I changed it to The Guilty.
Oh,
it's actually meant to be, my title was The Guilty, but then we thought it sounded a bit too much like a legal thriller, maybe. So, they know what they're doing. I mean, they're so good at choosing titles, and you know, it was a great decision. So
you mentioned earlier that you spend a lot of time with your characters and sort of, you know, getting them right and getting their voices. Do you sort of imagine what they look like? Do you
Definitely.
have?
Yeah.
So have you got? So can you? So Johnny, I was trying to, you know, I was thinking he was going to be quite handsome and a bit buff.
He's quite handsome. Yeah, he works out a lot at the gym, doesn't he? Quite vain. I mean, they're all approaching their 40s, but he's really wanting to keep that I mean, you see that scene when he arrives in Italy, and the sort of hunky Italian driver drops him off, and he's feeling a bit like, oh, he's in his 20s,
yeah,
he's feeling like he's losing it a bit. But yeah,
yeah.
and then his wife Lana, she's quite she's a little bit overweight. She's not lost the baby weight, so she feels very self-conscious about that. And she's not the prettiest, but she's always felt a bit self-conscious because Padma, who's her best friend, is regarded as very good looking. So she's always felt a bit in her shadow like that.
Yeah.
But she's also from a single parent household, and her mother treated her very badly. So she's already got quite a lower self-esteem because her mother was very cruel to her. So that hasn't helped.
No.
Nick's quite average, isn't he? He's a bit geeky.
Yeah. I sort of thought he was sort of a bit geeky. Just sort of nice guy.
Street accountant, sort of nice, like a bit bland, but reliable.
Yeah.
And then Marcus is just like really quite sweet. I think he's slightly older than the rest of them.
Yeah. Well, he's come in later, hasn't he?
He met Vanessa 8 years after they left Oxford, so he's come in later. But he's just like a really sort of nice average guy, not the best looking, but really kind as well. And it's almost like the fatherly figure of the group, I suppose.
Yeah, and he's the one who sort of he looks at them all differently, doesn't he? Because he doesn't have that sort of baggage with them all.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's quite relieved that he doesn't as well.
Yeah, I think he is as well.
When he sees, because when they first arrive, and I think there's a chapter from his perspective when he says he can already feel the underlying tension, even though they're having drinks on the terrace. But the sort of cutting, underhand comments that are being made. He's like, we've barely been here 5 minutes and it's already starting. And because he wanted his wife's 40th birthday to be a lovely celebration, and he was actually quite surprised when she suggested it, because he wanted
because although they've been friends for a long time, as it's really difficult to talk about, but we know
something has driven them apart.
Exactly. So but they have still kept to being friends, because they could have completely just cut ties, couldn't they, and just gone off. But actually that one thing that's driving them apart also keeps them together in a sort of strange way, because they've got that shared history, haven't they? And
exactly. And I think Nick is Johnny's son's sort of godfather, I think.
Godfather.
So it would almost seem odd if they did completely break away for the people that are in on the secret. If you know what I mean.
Also, I think there is that tension of, like you said, Lana and Nick both come from very different backgrounds to Vanessa and sorry, not Vanessa. Yes, Vanessa and Johnny, and Padma as well, because she, like you said, she was, before what happens to her, she was going to be, she was going to have a really sort of high flying career and everything, and that's completely changed because of what happened. But actually, it's quite the dynamic of that sort of, them having, one and one, them being very different, two of them being from that background and two of them being from the other background, and then Marcus, he doesn't really get involved, does he, with that, because he meets afterwards.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so you do have that sort of tension between them all. And class was something that I wanted to bring in as an issue, because it is a factor in society, and it, at Oxford as well, it remains to this day to be like that. So I thought it was quite an important issue to address. But I think that deep down, Johnny and Vanessa almost feel a little bit ashamed of it as well, because they didn't ask to be born into that, and then they don't particularly like their fathers either, because of the way they treated them. So it's just the life they were born into, really. And I think that comes across, because Johnny says, at the beginning says, I'm a director of an investment bank, I have money, but am I happy? Does anyone care? Does anyone, it doesn't matter. Doesn't mean anything in life in the grand scheme of things.
Well, that's why it's quite interesting as well, is that, that none of them, there's none of them that are happy. There's none of them. I mean, I guess Marcus I think
he's happy with Vanessa. He's just not happy with something that's been troubling him.
For a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was like I say, it was absolutely, I think if you haven't read it, it's such a good book to, you know, to really sort of get in, because I think the sort of psychological element of it as well. I think it's not just about saying, oh, they did this and they did. It's actually,
it's about the guilt and, you know, trying to see that inner turmoil and the kind of the conflict that some of them are feeling, because, you know,
yeah,
on the one hand, they dying to get this thing off their chests, you know, that the shame, the guilt is almost strangling the air out of them. But of course, they have this fear that after all this time, if it does come out, the ramifications, not just for themselves, but for others, are
yeah,
huge. And they could lose so much, you know, it's not so much just, not just materially, but, you know, their whole lives will implode. So it's this, and you feel it as it goes on, that claustrophobia building up, building up, building up.
yeah, because they do, like you say, they almost want to, all of them who've been involved with that want to confess, don't they? They want it off of there, but they can't. It's like because it's like the deception has gone on for so long
Yes.
that it's just not easy just to go, oh, actually, you know, this
Yeah.
happened, I did this, or, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Because
just not.
you've lied to someone's face for so long. How can you
Yeah,
do that? Yeah. Yeah.
and I think there's also they sort of, you know, there's the relationships between sort of that have happened before, because I think Marcus doesn't really understand the relationship between Johnny and Vanessa, does he? And he knows they were close, but there's a point where he wonders whether there's something going on with them,
Yeah.
whereas that's absolutely so far from the truth.
It is, but we discover what it was
Yeah,
further into the narrative as well, which explains their bond,
yeah,
and why they are so close.
but yeah, no, it was because I think is the deception part of the fun when you're writing it? Is it, you know, that sort of like you said, dropping the red herring in, or, you know,
Definitely, I love that.
yeah.
That's the most fun part. Deception, and just making the reader want to guess and wonder what it is, and just keep turning the pages. But actually, also, you know, at some point you have to let the reader into something, because they'll be like,
Yeah,
okay, you can't keep referring to a secret. You need to tell me something, and I think that's okay in a psychological thriller, because a lot of the suspense comes from, you know, the others when they're going to find out. You know, as a reader, we might know somebody's secret, and the
yeah,
thrill for us as the reader is thinking, God, how are they going to get out of this one, and how's that person going to react, considering how close they are, their relationship, and
yeah.
you just know that the upshot's going to be horrendous, you know, potentially fatal. So the reader's thinking, God, what's going to happen? And that's what they want to find out. And that's why what makes a psychological thriller slightly different from a straight thriller, I think, because
Yeah.
it's all about the mind games they're playing with each other.
Well, and also like how the mind games of, because like you said, when, as we know, as we go through the book and we find out more about what happened in Oxford, we become more knowledgeable than the characters, or some
Yes.
of the characters.
Yeah.
And that, like you say, gives you a bit of power, but also it does give you that stress of like, oh,
Yeah.
this is not gonna go well.
No, yeah.
How
This
is this
person is
gonna
not going to
happen?
take this very well. Yeah.
No, and I think it's really difficult, but there's a bit towards the end where one of them finds out something about the other one, which literally rocks their world. But you know that they've sort of but you know something about them, and you're like, oh no, I'm really conflicted with this.
Yeah. Yeah. They've all got something. They're
Yeah.
all hiding something. Something big.
So who was your favorite to write? Who was your favorite character in the book?
God, that's a difficult question. I've never thought about that. I quite enjoyed being Johnny.
Did you?
Because he was quite, you know, he had this sort of brazen, cocky side to him.
Yeah.
But then as the book goes on, you see the conflict in him, and you see the good side of him come out.
Yeah.
He feels, you know, that was quite fun, because he changed in some ways.
Yeah.
And Padma too, I suppose. I quite enjoyed being her because she obviously went through the trauma of Oxford as well. So it was getting into her, that fear of when she wakes up in Oxford, she doesn't know what's happened. She's completely changed. So, and then obviously we know what happens in real time in Italy, the secret she's got as well. So that was quite interesting to
Yeah. Yeah,
They're all quite fun to write, to be honest. I quite liked being all of them, to be honest. That's what I like about different characters.
There can't be any more surprises, and then there was, which was great, because you weren't like plodding along and thinking, oh, what's going to happen. It was literally like, bam, here we go, right, the next one. It was sort of constant, and I think you need that sort of fast pace, don't you, in a psychological thriller?
Because that's what you want the action to be.
Yeah,
you don't want too many long passages or
no
description. It's got to be bang, bang, bang.
Do you have a favorite crime writer or a favorite writer at all?
Gosh, favorite writer. I mean, I love all psychological thrillers writers. I'm not going to say I have a favorite writer because I read all of them like religiously. Yeah. So there are so many good ones around these days. Like B.P. Walter, Lauren North.
Yeah.
I mean, I love crime writers too, like Mike Craven. He's a brilliant police procedural writer. I mean, there are just so many good writers around.
There are so many good writers.
It would be unfair to say, yes, you're my favorite. I mean, back in the day when I first discovered crime fiction, John Grisham was my hero because I was into legal thrillers then, and I just
yes,
everything about his writing was it was masterclass. Plotting, compelling characters.
Yeah,
the sort of rookie lawyers up against the big corporate giants. I really enjoyed all of that. So he was my inspiration really to get into crime writing. But now there's so many.
Yeah. But the transition from being a lawyer to a writer, was that something that you took a long time to decide, or was it something that you
It was always something brewing in my head because I've always loved to write, even though I wouldn't say it as a child. I knew I was always going to be a writer, but I was always very good at English. I always read a lot from when I was very, very small because as an only child as well, I think you inevitably do read more because you don't have a playmate around to kind of mess around with. So I did, I used to write short stories. So, and when I became disillusioned with law, I knew I wanted to do something, and just writing it was obvious for me. I had an urge to write, and so I did, and I was fortunate to be able to start writing, and I published a couple of women's fiction novels. I self-published.
Oh right, yeah.
Because when the kids were a little bit older and in school, it gave me I had the time to sort of start writing my legal thrillers, which obviously take a lot of planning and research and plotting, as we know.
So you have sort of swapped your genres around a little bit, so you started off, and is this, do you think you found your sort of niche now, or is there anything else you'd like to try?
I mean, I love writing psychological thrillers. I think it definitely is my niche. I think it's where I'm happiest and what I'm best at doing. But I would still love to, I write thrillers in general, as I had the Kramer Carver novels, which was about an amateur sleuth lawyer, Maddie Kramer. And I loved writing those. I loved the relationship she had with the policeman. And I've written 2 of those. I'd love to write the 3rd and get that published.
Yeah.
But for now, I think the psychological thrillers are, where my forte is, maybe. I don't know, just where I fit.
Well, if you enjoy it and you are able to write, with that sort of passion, and it sort of is a no-brainer, really, isn't it?
I just really like exploring human nature and just everyday situations that we can all relate to, and just what's the worst that can happen? Taking it from there.
Well, quite a bit, really, I think.
Particularly in my
this one. So are you writing at the moment?
I am, actually, because the next one is due out about this time next year, so I need to get that in for September. So I am writing a new one at the moment. So,
and is that going well? Can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what the theme is. It's about a landlady and a male tenant. That's
Ooh.
all I'm saying.
That's
There's
interesting.
been a lot of books about landlords and creepy landlords, so I thought I'd turn it on its head. And
Have you ever read that really dark Roald Dahl short story about the landlady?
Do you know, I do know what you mean. I need to go back and look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't read it, but somebody I used to work with, she when I used to do a shared reading group when I worked at the
Yeah.
library, and we were talking about it, and she said she'd read it at school and she remembered it. It still stayed with her, and I read it, and yeah, I guarantee
I need
if
to
you,
read that now. I'm going to read
I
that
think it's
like
called, I
tomorrow.
have to check if Sam's on it. I think it's called The Landlady.
Yeah.
It's really dark. I mean, Roald Dahl is
Oh, of
quite
course.
dark
It's known
anyway,
for being dark. Yeah.
but it's
Well, it
really
sounds like
dark.
my kind of read, so I'm going to read
Yeah,
it.
it's not very long.
No.
But yeah, have a read of it.
Okay.
I'll speak to you about it off, because it's very good. It's very Roald Dahl, very
Yeah.
dark, very
Yeah.
to the point, and
Well,
yes,
I like to try something different with each of my books, and so we've had the exotic thriller in Italy
yeah,
now, so I'm coming back to. It's actually set in Hampstead in that area, so
nice,
so
yeah.
yeah.
Well, there could be, it could be so much. There's could be so many ways that goes. It could be, it could be.
One or
Well, we'll
two
have to wait,
twists.
won't we? We're gonna have to
Yeah,
wait until
yeah.
next year to find out.
Yes, you
Um,
will. Yeah.
So I can't see whose name it is, but somebody's asked, do you have a must buy or read straight away author? Like, is there anybody that or more than one that you'll go at as soon as you see they've got a new one coming out, you'll be like, right, I'm off.
Well, Mike Craven, I always buy his
Yeah.
books. Yeah, immediately. I'm dying to read Fearless, which is about to come out. Who else? Gosh. On the spot now. Louise Candlish, obviously.
Oh yeah. No, I like hers. They're really
There's so
clever.
many people. Like, I'm so hot.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. Any really good
Yeah.
female writer, honestly, psychological thriller author. I love them all, to be honest. Catherine
So,
Cooper's another great psychological thriller writer. I always read her
sorry, who was
books.
that? I didn't
Catherine
catch that.
Cooper.
Oh yes,
I love her books
yeah.
because she writes
I mean,
quite dark books as well. Her characters aren't. People call my characters not particularly likable, and she always makes a laugh that hers aren't that likable either, but they're really compelling. So I enjoy reading her books.
I think I've read characters that are more unlikable than yours. I mean, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but
I think these characters actually one some of my most likable ones. You need to read the other books.
I think that there were certain things about them that you're obviously not going to like, but I mean, sometimes that they can be vile for the sake of being vile, and I don't think yours
I'd
were like
like
that
to
at
think
all.
they all have some kind of redeeming feature.
Yeah, I think they did. I think probably Lana was my least favorite, but just because of things which we can't talk about.
The way she went about things. Yeah.
Yes, the way she went about things. Yeah, I think she was probably my and yeah, I can't say the other one, but yeah, if you read it, you'll sort of understand why. Because I think there's a big for me there was a big twist which I didn't see coming, and so like Johnny, like you said, Johnny was, when you first meet him you think, oh, he's a bit arrogant, but actually he wasn't as bad as he wasn't.
There
Is
are
it
things
hard?
that happened that weren't really his fault. So
Yeah, exactly. Is it like with your reviews and things, is it difficult when people don't get what you were, because so some of the characters aren't, you might not like them for various reasons, but they're like that for a reason, aren't they? That's what, if they were all like not doing
Wouldn't be
anything.
much of a thriller if they were
It
all
wouldn't be any
lovely.
thriller at all, would it? If they were just sat there having a cup of tea and
Yeah, exactly.
talking about the weather.
It wouldn't really, ramp up the suspense for me. But
no. So is that difficult, or is it just like you're just like, okay, right? Or do you not read the bad ones?
I mean, I do, and my publisher occasionally was like, "Don't read the bad," It's so, but so many authors are like that. You'll get 50 brilliant reviews, and then you'll look at the bad one, and that was all that, and you'll be like, "How could they say that? They didn't get that. That's not what I meant. Did they read it
No.
properly?" And it's because it gets sometimes it can feel very personal.
Yeah,
There's
I should
nothing wrong with
imagine.
a constructive review, but when it
No.
feels a bit like they're really trying to make a dig and be quite mean, I find those quite hard to take. But I know I need to have a thicker skin and not take it to
No,
heart,
I
because it
think,
happens to all authors and it's
yeah,
part
I
of the
think it's
job.
unnecessary in a way. I think that I would rather not do a review than write
Yeah,
a bad one. And
yeah.
I know people say, "Oh, well, that's not reviewing," but actually that's my choice.
And
I think,
some of them, they'll write great big essays.
I
Just like,
know.
what? Please stop.
I think, there's nothing wrong with being kind, is there? You might not like it. It
Yeah.
might not have ticked your box,
You
but
might just say, yeah, this, I can see why someone might like it.
yeah,
It wasn't my cup of tea, that's fine.
exactly.
Everyone has,
Yeah.
writing is subjective. No one's going to like, it's why we
No.
don't all get publishing deals first off, because writing is subjective, and what one
Yeah.
person likes, another person doesn't. It's like anything in the arts industry, isn't it? It's like seeing a painting,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a sort of difference between the way you frame your
Yeah.
criticism.
Well, actually, the reviews have been massively good, haven't they? They've
So
been
far,
like,
so good. They've been really, really
yeah,
good. Yeah, I've been really,
yeah.
really happy with
Because
them.
I was lucky enough to be in my other life as this
Squad
with the
pod.
squad
Yeah,
pod. Yeah,
wonderful squad pod. I love the squad
one of the
pod.
squad pod. I was able to read this as a and Kaz gave me this one as well. So I was like in two worlds collided.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing, and I hadn't read any of your other ones, so I am going to read
Oh, please, that
The
would be
Loyal
great.
Friend. So yeah, no, I really want to, because I really loved the way that that you managed to balance so many characters, and it works really well, because I have read books where there's 10 characters and you've got absolutely no idea what's going on. So
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
to be able to do that is well done you. It's an
Oh,
amazing feat.
thanks. Thank you.
So I did give you a bit of a heads up, didn't I, before, about what you've read recently that you
Yeah.
enjoy. Are you able to share anything with us that you've read recently
Can I
that
say a
you've
couple of books? Is that
liked? You
okay?
can say as
Yeah.
many as you like.
So
We love a recommendation.
the first one is actually a hero book, which is coming out in July. It's called The Brother, by N.V. Peacock. And it's a psychological thriller about a serial killer, but with a bit of a twist. I read it as a proof to give a quote to Nikki.
Oh right,
It was totally my kind of thing, because it's very dark. And it's about this woman called Fallon. She's a therapist, and she finds out that her mother swapped her at birth, and so her mother's not her real mother. She's actually the daughter of someone else who has 3 sons, and she finds out through a genealogy tree test thing that she's related. One of them is a serial killer, basically.
Oh wow.
So
Oh
it's kind of
blimey,
this
you don't want
cat
to do
and
the
mouse,
DNA on that one.
this sort of cat and mouse thing of can she, it's her brother, but can she track it? And he's almost teasing her with clues and things like that, and she doesn't know which of the brothers it is.
Oh,
So
that
that's
sounds so
very,
good.
very,
So who was that by?
NB Peacock. NB
NVP.
Peacock, yeah. That's another hero book. I think
Yeah, I
that's
think
coming in July.
that sounds amazing.
And another one I've just read is by Daniel Ramsey. It's called The Perfect Husband. It's a brilliantly written book. It's very harrowing, but it's a brilliant book. It's about this woman called Sophie, and she has a whirlwind romance with the seemingly perfect guy of her dreams. And on her wedding night, he breaks her arm. And from then on, he gaslights her, he isolates her from
Oh, God.
her family, but it's written in such a compelling way in the first person from Sophie's point of view, and it's just, you can't stop turning the pages. And then finally things get too much, and it's about how she breaks free from that trap that she's forced her in. So
Wow.
they're both two. I mean, it's probably more of a sort of domestic psychological thriller, but it's gripping. It's very much.
That sounds it.
I mean, I read it so quick, but both of them are really, really good. I'd really recommend them.
Yes, I'm saying, yeah, I've added that to Brother to my shopping list. I have too as well. It sounds really good. It sounds like the ultimate bad Jeremy Kyle, doesn't it? When you go on and you find out from your DNA test that you're
I know. I thought it was a very clever idea, actually. I thought it was a very unique, clever idea.
Yeah, no, really clever. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Alex. It's been absolutely fascinating. And if you haven't read The Final Party, it is out now with Hera Books. I keep moving it. I need to move it's a really great read. You won't, once you've read, well, you had a little taste with the prologue. It just gets better and better as you go through. And right up until the last page, you will be kept guessing because there's just things come in. And yeah, so it's absolutely fabulous.
Plus it transports you to Italy.
Yeah, well, yeah. So although I can't go to Sorrento like my son, I did go to Sorrento before him, actually. So
you have
been. No, I just want to go there. It sounds amazing. So yeah, although I don't want to go with them.
No, me neither.
I'll go on my own or with my husband rather than them.
That's probably a bit safer.
Well, I hope so. Thank you. So tune in for our next talks. I think I can't remember who are the next ones. Kaz might give me a prompt, or Sam might give me a prompt for who on. But if you're on, if you keep an eye on our featured events, you'll see who's up next. And thank you for everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.